The dawn came slow that morning, rolling over the gray horizon like a tired promise. The sea was calm, but not silent. It breathed in long, heavy sighs, the kind that carried warnings old fishermen could hear if they were willing to listen. Thomas Hensley stood at the edge of his small dock, his boots damp, his eyes fixed on the horizon. 60 years old and built by the sea itself, strong hands, deep lines around the eyes, and a voice that carried the roughness of salt and wind. The ocean had taken more from him than it had ever given, yet he still showed up every morning as if redemption might drift in with the tide. His boat, the Evelyn May, named after his late wife, rocked gently against the ropes. The paint was peeling, the motor tired, but it was all he had left of her and of himself. He had promised her years ago that he would stop fishing after her passing, but promises are hard to keep when the sea keeps calling your name. From behind him came a voice, low, cautious. "You sure you want to go out today, Tom?" It was Luke, a younger fisherman who'd learned much from Thomas, but still feared the ocean's darker moods. Thomas gave a short, dry laugh. "The sea's gentle today, she won't bite." Luke frowned, glancing toward the horizon. "That's what she always says before she takes something." Thomas didn't answer. He tightened the straps on his weathered coat, climbed into the Evelyn May, and started the engine. The sound broke the morning's quiet like a declaration of defiance. As the boat drifted away from shore, the gulls circled above him, crying out warnings he'd long since stopped hearing. Behind him, the town of Port Haven grew smaller until it was nothing but a smear of gray against the endless blue. Thomas looked down at his hands, the same hands that had held nets, ropes, and his wife's frail fingers on her last night. He closed his eyes, whispered something only the wind could carry, and opened them again to the wide, waiting sea. The ocean glimmered, calm and beautiful, but somewhere beneath that surface, something was stirring, and before the day was done, Thomas Hensley would discover what it meant to fight for the sun again. The morning stretched wide and pale, the kind of light that made the world look freshly washed. Thomas guided the Evelyn May through the familiar channel, his boat groaning as it met the open water. Every wave felt like an old friend, greeting him with a slap and a shove. He set his nets with care. The rhythm was second nature: cast, wait, haul. Each rope was frayed from decades of work, each knot tied in a way only he understood. His body remembered what his heart often tried to forget. As he worked, his mind wandered to Evelyn, her laugh, her quiet strength, the way she'd scolded him for pushing himself too hard. She had loved the sea but feared its temper. "One day," she had told him, "you'll have to choose between what you love and what's left of you." He had chosen the sea, and it had chosen to keep testing him. Around noon, he spotted a shimmer near the surface, silver scales flashing like coins in the sunlight. A school of bluefin moving fast, his pulse quickened. A catch that size could pay his debts and buy him another season. Thomas adjusted his line, whispered a prayer, and cast deep. The ocean responded with a pull so strong it jolted his arms. The net strained, heavy and alive. He grinned for the first time in weeks. But as he leaned over the side, clouds began to thicken on the horizon. The air changed, colder, charged, uncertain. He glanced up. The calm sea was shifting, whispering in a new tone. He thought of turning back just for a moment, then he shook his head. "One more haul," he muttered, "just one more." He didn't know that those words would soon echo beneath the waves as the sea prepared to collect its due. By the time Thomas realized how quickly the weather was changing, the wind had already turned against him. The once gentle waves now slapped hard at the hull, their rhythm meaner, sharper. He pulled at the ropes, trying to free the net that had snagged on something below, but the harder he tugged, the deeper it held. The boat groaned under the strain, tilting slightly as another gust of wind tore across the deck. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, blurring the line between sea and sky. He couldn't tell where the horizon ended anymore, only water everywhere. Thomas braced himself, gripping the wheel. He thought of Evelyn again, her warning voice in his memory. The sea roared like it had heard her too. Then came the sound, a deep crack from beneath. The net had caught on rock or wreckage or something far worse. The tension snapped one of the pulleys clean off, whipping past his shoulder. He stumbled, catching himself on the railing just as lightning carved the sky. For an instant, the world was pure white, and in that light, Thomas saw it, the massive shape beneath the surface, dark and slow, pulling against his line. It wasn't just a catch, it was something alive, ancient. The boat lurched, the deck flooded, the storm howled. Thomas tried to cut the line, but the knife slipped from his hand and vanished into the water. A wave rose over the bow and crashed down, knocking him to his knees. He shouted, but the wind swallowed his voice whole. Then with one last pull from below, the boat tilted hard to one side, and Thomas Hensley fell into the freezing black. Cold silence, pressure. The sea wrapped around him like a living thing, heavy and endless. Thomas tried to swim, but his coat weighed him down. The light from above faded fast, shrinking to a pale shimmer. He reached out blindly, kicking, clawing for the surface. His lungs burned. He could taste the salt, metallic and sharp. Then his hand brushed against something, a rope, the net. He was tangled in it, dragged deeper by its weight. Panic exploded in his chest. He twisted, pulled, kicked. Every movement made the cords tighten. His thoughts splintered, memories flashing like quicksilver. Evelyn laughing in the kitchen. The first time he'd taken Luke out fishing. The last time he'd kissed his wife's forehead, promising he'd be careful. He saw her face, calm and forgiving, and for a moment he stopped fighting. Maybe this was where the sea wanted him. Maybe this was the end she'd always warned him about. But then faintly he saw it, a glow above, faint and golden, filtering through the dark water. The sun. He clenched his jaw, forced his arms free of one loop, then another. His lungs screamed for air, his heart hammering so hard it hurt. With a final wrench, he tore loose from the net, the cords scraping skin and cloth. He kicked upward, desperate, dizzy. The surface looked impossibly far. He swam anyway. When Thomas broke the surface, the world above had turned to chaos. The storm had grown into a monster, waves towering higher than houses, the wind screaming like a wounded animal. He gasped for air, coughing, his eyes stinging from the salt. His boat was gone. Only splintered wood floated around him. He tried to find something solid, anything that could hold him. His hands found a broken plank and he clung to it, chest heaving. Every few seconds the waves dragged him under, tossing him like driftwood. His muscles ached, but he kept kicking. He refused to let go. Through the roar he thought he heard a voice, soft, steady. "Evelyn, don't stop now, Thomas, you've come too far." He shouted her name into the wind, though it came out as a hoarse cry. The cold was deep now, creeping into his bones. He knew he couldn't last much longer, but somewhere inside him, something ancient, stubborn, refused to die in silence. He turned his face toward the storm and whispered, "You can take my boat, but not my soul." Lightning cracked again, and for a heartbeat, the whole world lit up, wild, silver, and alive. He saw land in the distance, or maybe it was a trick of the mind, but he aimed for it anyway, pushing through the waves, one stroke at a time. Thomas swam until his arms went numb. The waves grew smaller, but the darkness thicker. The storm was breaking, but the night had fully claimed the sky. He floated on his back, staring at the faint glimmer of stars between clouds. Each breath was a fight, each second a victory. Memories came to him like drifting wreckage. The day he married Evelyn, the laughter of their daughter who'd moved inland years ago, the quiet mornings he'd spent repairing nets and whispering to the sea. He realized in that moment that all his life he'd chased the ocean, not for the catch, not for the money, but for what it gave him when the world felt too heavy to bear, purpose. Now that same sea seemed to test if he was worthy of keeping it. When dawn finally began to bleed across the horizon, Thomas was barely conscious. His fingers found sand beneath them. He had made it. Thomas awoke to the cries of gulls and the sting of sunlight on his face. He was lying on a rocky shore, his clothes stiff with salt, his body aching in every bone. For a while he didn't move. He just breathed slow, careful breaths, grateful for air. A fishing boat appeared in the distance, heading his way. He tried to wave, but his arm barely lifted. Still, the captain saw him and changed course. Two men hauled him aboard, their voices muffled by his exhaustion. He caught only pieces. Old man thought he was gone, lucky. When they asked his name, he whispered it, almost in disbelief. Thomas Hensley. Back at the harbor, word spread fast. Luke was the first to run down the dock, eyes wide. "Tom, I thought the sea took you." Thomas managed a tired smile. She tried. Weeks passed before Thomas had the strength to walk the docks again. The townsfolk treated him like a ghost come home, touching his shoulder, thanking God for his return. He never spoke much about what happened beneath the waves. Some things, he said, were between a man and the sea. One quiet morning he stood by the Evelyn May's wrecked hull. What little of it had been recovered. The sunrise spread across the water, gold and soft, and he felt something settle inside him, peace. He no longer needed to conquer the ocean. He only needed to honor it. He took Evelyn's wedding band from his pocket, the one he had worn around his neck for years, and tossed it gently into the tide. The sea took it with a whisper, and the light seemed to catch it mid-sink, like a final promise fulfilled. Thomas smiled through his tears. The sea takes much from us, he murmured, but it always returns a piece of truth. Moral reflection. Even in the darkest depths, the will to rise is the truest form of faith.